Hello and welcome back to 10-Minute Deep Dives. Today we're diving into the unsettling world of Ed Gein.
Ed Gein.
Yeah, Ed Gein. You've probably heard his name whispered in the same breath as Leatherface, Norman Bates, and Buffalo Bill, some of the most iconic horror movie villains. So what makes Gein's story so uniquely disturbing that it continues to inspire filmmakers and terrify audiences decades later?
It is a fascinating question, isn't it? While fictional monsters can certainly be scary, there's a chilling power in knowing that characters like Leatherface and Norman Bates are loosely based on a real person. It taps into our primal fears and makes the horror hit a little too close to home.
Absolutely. And the source material you sent is just, wow. It paints a really grim picture of Gein's life, starting with his childhood in rural Wisconsin.
Yes, his upbringing was far from idyllic. Born in 1906, Ed Gein grew up isolated on a farm with an overbearing and religious mother, Augusta, and a largely absent alcoholic father. This kind of environment where social interaction is limited and control is exerted through fear and dogma can have a profound impact on a child's development.
It almost sounds like a horror movie setup itself. The source mentions that his mother, Augusta, instilled a deep fear of women and sexuality in him, often reading graphic passages from the Bible about sin and damnation.
It's a tragic example of how distorted beliefs and unhealthy attachments can shape a person's worldview, especially during those formative years. Imagine growing up believing that women are inherently sinful and dangerous. That kind of thinking can have devastating consequences.
And tragically, it seems that isolation and unhealthy attachments were recurring themes throughout Gein's life. The source details the deaths of his father and brother, both occurring under suspicious circumstances.
Yes, his father passed away from heart failure in 1940 after years of struggling with alcoholism. Then just 4 years later, his brother Henry died in a fire on the farm. While officially ruled an accident, some speculate that Gein might have played a role in his brother's death.
It's definitely unsettling, especially considering Gein was the one who led authorities to his brother's body. And as if losing his father and brother wasn't enough, his mother Augusta passed away in 1945. The source describes Gein as being completely devastated by her death.
The loss of a parent, especially one who has been such a dominant force in your life, can be a deeply traumatic experience. It can trigger feelings of abandonment, grief, and even rage.
And it seems Gein's reaction to his mother's death was anything but normal. He sealed off parts of the house, preserving them as a shrine to her. He even kept her body in a bed upstairs for a time.
This behavior is certainly indicative of an unhealthy attachment, perhaps even bordering on what Freud called the Oedipal complex. To put it simply, this theory suggests that a son may develop an unconscious desire for his mother, seeing his father as a rival for her affection. Of course, we can't diagnose Gein from afar, but it's a framework that helps us understand the complexities of a psyche.
That makes sense. It's like he was trying to hold on to her even after death. But his fascination with the female form didn't end there. The source mentions that he started visiting local cemeteries, exhuming bodies, particularly those of middle-aged women who reminded him of his mother.
What's fascinating here is that Gein's actions went beyond simple grave robbing. He wasn't motivated by greed or a desire to desecrate graves. It was something much deeper, something tied to his distorted perception of women and his longing for his mother.
And things took an even darker turn in 1957 with the disappearance of Bernice Warden, a local hardware store owner. Her son, who also happened to be the deputy sheriff, found the cash register open and blood on the floor. He quickly suspected Gein, who had been in the store earlier that day.
That suspicion turned out to be well-founded. What the police discovered when they searched Gein's farmhouse was absolutely horrifying and would forever cement his place in the annals of true crime. It was a scene straight out of a nightmare.
Yeah, imagine walking into a dimly lit farmhouse, the air thick with this stench of decay, and finding furniture upholstered with human skin lampshades made from stretched faces, skulls used as bowls. It was a grotesque tableau that revealed the depths of Gein's depravity.
It's hard to even fathom the level of psychological disturbance at play here. The source mentions that they also found a belt fashioned from nipples, a corset made from a female torso, and masks made from human faces. What could possibly drive someone to create such things?
That's the question that has captivated and horrified people for decades. Some experts believe that Gein was attempting to create a sort of woman suit, a macabre costume that would allow him to literally inhabit the skin of women, perhaps even those who reminded him of his mother. It's like a twisted and grotesque manifestation of his longing for connection, a longing that was so warped by his upbringing and isolation that it manifested in this horrific way.
Exactly. And amidst this collection of horrors, they also found the remains of Mary Hogan, a tavern keeper who had disappeared a few years earlier. Gein confessed to killing both Mary Hogan and Bernice Warden, but denied engaging in necrophilia, claiming that the bodies Smelled too bad.
It's a chilling detail that further underscores the psychological complexity of this case. We're dealing with someone who is capable of unspeakable acts of violence and desecration, yet also seemed to hold on to a bizarre set of morals, distorted as they may have been.
And this distinction between Gein's actions and his own twisted sense of morality is partly why his case became a legal and psychiatric puzzle. He was ultimately found not guilty by reason of insanity and committed to a mental institution.
The insanity plea is always a controversial topic. How can someone commit such horrific acts and yet be deemed not responsible for their actions?
It's a question that gets to the heart of how we define mental illness and criminal responsibility. In legal terms, insanity means that at the time of the crime, the defendant was suffering from a mental defect so severe that they were unable to understand the nature and quality of their actions, or that what they were doing was wrong.
So in Gein's case, the court determined that his mental state prevented him from understanding the gravity of his crimes.
Precisely. And while he was never deemed fit to stand trial, he did undergo extensive psychological evaluations during his time in the institution. These evaluations provide some fascinating insights into his psyche, revealing a deeply troubled and isolated individual whose fantasies had crossed over into a terrifying reality.
It's tragic on so many levels.
Yeah.
Not only the lives that were lost, but also the fact that Gein was clearly a deeply disturbed individual who needed help that he likely never received.
And this brings us to another layer of Gein's legacy, the impact he's had on popular culture. His story has served as a cautionary tale, a reminder of the dark side of human nature and the consequences of neglecting mental health.
And as we mentioned earlier, he's become a sort of macabre muse for horror filmmakers, inspiring iconic characters like Leatherface from the Texas Chainsaw Massacre and Norman Bates from Psycho. What is it about Gein's story that continues to resonate with audiences and filmmakers even today?
I think it's that unsettling blend of reality and fiction, that makes Gein's story so compelling. He wasn't a supernatural monster or a demon. He was a human being who walked among us. Someone who seemingly lived an ordinary life while harboring these incredibly dark impulses. It forces us to confront the uncomfortable reality that the line between sanity and madness can be incredibly thin.
And it's that everyman aspect that makes it all more terrifying, right? Because it makes us wonder what's lurking beneath the surface of people we encounter every day.
Exactly. Gein's case tapped into a collective fear of the unknown, of the darkness that might reside within seemingly ordinary people. And by inspiring fictional characters like Leatherface and Norman Bates, his story has become a sort of modern folklore, a cautionary tale that continues to be told and retold.
It's interesting that you mentioned folklore because Gein's farmhouse, which could have become a morbid tourist attraction, mysteriously burned down before it could be auctioned off. Some people believe it was arson, perhaps an attempt to erase the physical reminder of his crimes.
It's almost as if the fire itself became part of the Gein legend, adding another layer of mystery and intrigue to his story. And even in death, Gein continues to fascinate and repel us. He's buried in an unmarked grave in Plainfield Cemetery. A decision that seems fitting given the horrific nature of his crimes.
It's strange to think that a man who inspired so much horror and fascination rests in such an anonymous place.
Yes, but perhaps that anonymity is a reflection of how society ultimately chose to deal with Gein and his legacy, by trying to bury the memory of his crimes and move on. But the truth is we can't simply erase the past. Gein's story serves as a stark reminder of the complexities of human nature, the power of early childhood experiences, and the importance of recognizing and addressing mental illness before it manifests in tragic and horrific ways.
Well, folks, that's our 10-minute deep dive into the unsettling world of Ed Gein. It's a story that continues to fascinate, horrify, and provoke us, reminding us that sometimes the most terrifying monsters are the ones that look just like us.